Please get out. Get out of this property. Immediately get out. Get out of this property immediately. Out. I don't want to hear anything. Out of this property immediately. I don't want to hear a word. Out. Out. Do you understand English? Get out of this property. Go. So go. Go. And don't come back without a warrant. Can you imagine those psychopaths? Passover, the holiest Christian festival in a year, and they're coming to intimidate Christians during the holiest festival? Unbelievable.
So if you think Pastor James Coates is a defiant Canadian pastor, I think that pastor there shows defiance at a whole other level. That was Pastor Artur Pawlowski in Calgary, up in Canada. And as you can see there, he was very upset. And I wanted in this video to show a little bit of the backstory to who this person is. He's originally from Poland, and he experienced really the horrors of a government that was very oppressive. So that's really a little bit of his background, and we'll look at an article here that talks about that. Before we do, make sure you subscribe to this channel if you would like more analysis, reviews, and fun from a Christian nerd's point of view. So this article here is definitely pro-Pastor Artur Pawlowski. This is definitely giving his perspective on things and is very favorable toward him. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of people who really have a strong reaction against this pastor in the way that he is confronting the police here. But knowing his background really does help in this situation, and I think it is very interesting. It says here, the viral video shows fiery pastor kicking out cops. A pastor is being praised as a hero for angrily confronting Canadian authorities who had entered a Calgary church to observe if the congregation was following the government's COVID-19 restrictions. The 2-minute confrontation, which has gone viral thanks to a video recording, shows 5 mask-wearing government officials being told to get out by Artur Pawlowski, a fiery street preacher pastor whose feuds with local authorities stretch back more than a decade. So it says here that he is a fiery street preacher pastor. So he has experience being in public and heralding what he believes, and he's kind of doing that here. He's kind of street preaching to the police here and telling them to get out. It says in the video he calls them Nazis and Gestapo for coming on Easter weekend and tells them only to return if they come back with a warrant. The group eventually backs down and walks out of the door while the pastor, still angry and loud, follows behind them as they leave down a sidewalk. "Do not come back, you Nazi psychopaths," the pastor continued. Again, when you watch that video, there could definitely be a reaction that this pastor is overreacting and he's really being abusive in what he's saying. But it's really interesting to hear his story. So the article does get to that. It says here, though, a statement from Calgary Police Service posted on Twitter says it sent a police officer to assist representatives from Alberta Health Services and the city of Calgary who went to the church because people attending the church service were not adhering to the government's public health orders, which are in place to ensure everyone's safety. It appears in the video, however, that 3 people are in police uniforms, not just 1. Reacting to the confrontation, Matt Staver of Liberty Counsel points out that Pastor Pawlowski is a Polish-born immigrant. That means the man's angry descriptions of Nazi and Gestapo are not without meaning. The Nazis were the ones that came into Poland, so he's very familiar with Nazism and communism and Marxism, Staver tells One News Now. These people experienced the loss of freedom. They experienced churches being shut down, churches being bulldozed, pastors being arrested, Christians being put in jail. In fact, Pawlowski says he is seeing that ugly authoritarian past repeat itself in his adopted home of Canada. Reached by the Daily Caller after the video went viral, the pastor told the caller that he grew up in Poland under the boot of the Soviet Union, and he witnessed the state arrest and even murder pastors and priests. He said he hopes his defiance will give courage to other churches and pastors and businesses to reclaim their freedom and kick those Nazis out. So he definitely has a past experience here that is playing into how he sees the situation and how he reacts when he sees police coming into his property. Now, he actually does, from what I understand, have a case for what he's saying there, that if they're going to be on his property, they do need to have a warrant if they're going to be in any way kind of encroaching on the church services and in what he would say is intimidating people. They really need to have a warrant to be there. But the background that this article is talking about here really shows where he's coming from, that he had very bad experiences. He goes on here, he says, "That's why I say what I say," he said, "because I see a repetition of history." Pawlowski, 48, is no stranger to Canada's open hatred of Orthodox Christianity. So there again, we do see a vantage point in this article that Canada is very anti-Christian, is what they're saying here. Some probably would not say that, but that's this article's perspective. But the criteria in which they're saying that are things like this situation here, where you have police going into a church. Anyway, it goes on here. In 2010, the Canada Revenue Agency revoked the tax exemption from King's Glory Fellowship, a church association, because its board of directors held strong negative views about abortion, homosexuality, and divorce. Those topics are biblical in nature, and many churchgoers have heard them mentioned from the pulpit, but the federal agency considered the topics political in nature and punished the Protestant Association. So there is another example where they're talking about the Canadian government really being opposed to Christianity. "The only political activity you can connect us to," Pawlowski told a local newspaper, "is defending our right to speak." Reacting to the viral video, Canadian activist journalist Ezra Levant commented in a Twitter post that Pastor Pawlowski showed how to handle police when they enter your church without a warrant. "They are lucky they only got a tongue lashing," Levant further commented, "because the criminal code states that it is a crime to disturb a church service." And so that would be the legal grounds on which this pastor could say the police cannot be there. They're not supposed to be disturbing a church service, and they need to have a warrant to come in. Levant also reminded his Twitter followers that Pastor Pawlowski was fined $1,200 in 2020 for violating COVID-19 restrictions. The pastor's crime was feeding the homeless in Calgary. Calgary, a city of approximately 1.3 million, is located in the province of Alberta, where a population of 4.3 million that has recorded 153,000 coronavirus and fewer than 2,000 deaths cases to date. Calgary resident Brian Rushfeld, who is a veteran of conservative politics, personally knows Pawlowski and says authorities were responding to a single anonymous complaint. "If one virus can allow police and politicians to lock people up, to close people down and destroy their lives," he observes, "if that's all it takes is one virus for that kind of abuse of power, we as a civilized people are in trouble." So this pastor and people that are on his side are really just very concerned about the overreach of government power and the abuse of government authority. And I can see where this pastor is coming from. Just looking at this story and reading a little bit about him and even hearing an interview with him, I can tell that he was very traumatized by his past. And, you know, I think there is a part of me that really resonates with what's happening in this video, because I see a man who experienced a government that was so oppressive, and he does not want to see that happen again. I see a very protective person. And I also see someone who has conviction. I mean, he actually talks in that video about this is a very important week for Christians, Holy Week and the Passover celebration, Resurrection Sunday. These are very important things to us as Christians. And so he's really standing for what he believes, and he's being protective, especially doing this in light of what he experienced in his past. So I can really empathize with where he's coming from, even though he is so harsh in this video. I can see where he's coming from and see why he's sounding the warning that he's giving here, even though I know a lot of people would say, oh, what's happening in Canada is nothing like the Soviet Union. But how do governments gain that power? How do they get to those places of oppression? And how do people protect their freedoms? And that's really the point this pastor is making, and I heard him on an interview talking about this, that our freedoms do need to be protected. We need to stand for them. And so that's really where he and others on his side are coming from. I would love to hear what you think about all of this in the comments below. I know people are going to have some different perspectives. Please try to keep those comments constructive and helpful to discussion. But it is always great to hear different points of view. But I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my point of view, brought to you from A Frisch Perspective.